Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to this talk, What is Game Design? So I am Jussi Holopainen. I'm a senior lecturer at Games Computing at the University of Lincoln. So let's start with the slides then. So what is game design? So as I already mentioned, that I'm a senior lecturer at Games Computing, University of Lincoln, and what I teach there is mainly game design, the principles of game design, and then also games research. So what I'm trying to do in this talk is to go through some of the first very general definitions of what game design is. I also introduced you to some notable game designers and how they have been also talking about their game design practice. Talk a bit about roles and responsibilities of game designers in the industry and then also as a profession. And then I'll introduce some models of how to understand what game design is as an activity. And in the end, I go a little bit philosophical and speculative about that, what game design is and what games are as cultural artifacts. Okay, and as a background, that's I've been here for the University of Lincoln for almost 4 years now, teaching game design and game studies. And previously, I've been working a lot with game design research and then also game research in general. So, for example, that I've been very active in the Digital Games Research Association work, especially in the conferences there. Right. So, what is game design? So here are one of the definitions from Katie Salen's and Eric Zimmerman's Rules of Play, which is a very good book if you want to know more about what game design is. And they say that game design is the process by which a game designer creates a game to be encountered by a player from which meaningful play emerges. And that is a quite concise and easy to handle definition of what game design is. And it also gives some good pointers there, which is that you are a game designer, you are creating something, which is the game, and that game needs to be encountered by a player, which means that the player needs to play your game in order to make it sense. And also the term meaningful play emerges is that is meaningful means that it is an experience for the player, which has meaning. And it's also the case is that it is through the interaction with the game that the players can have these experiences. I'll come back to these issues also later in the talk when I talk about player experience and so on. And player experience, as was also talked about in the previous lecture in this series by Kieran Hicks. If you haven't seen that talk, go check it out. It is a very good introduction to what is player experience and how to do research on player experience. And then here's another one, again by Eric Zimmerman. To design a game is to construct a set of rules, but the point of a game design is not to have the players experience rules, it is to have players experience play. So game design is therefore a second-order design problem in which designers craft play, but only indirectly through the systems of rules that game designers create. And this again gives a better understanding of what game design is as a second-order design problem. It is that we are like if I'm designing, let's say, a pen, the experience of the pen is that you are experiencing the pen directly, the physical form, how it looks like, how it smells like, how it feels like. But that is not the case with the game, because in a game, the designer is just putting together the rules or the mechanics and the systems, and then the player experiences the play and not the rules or the systems directly. And I'll come back to that a bit later again. So these basic definitions from Zimmerman and Salen, that they already give a quite good founding and understanding what game design is. Or let's say lays the groundwork for understanding what game design is. But then I'll To also lay a different kind of a groundwork, I'll go through some notable game designers, because games have a long history and also a long prehistory. I think that the earliest games come around at the earliest archaeological evidence for games comes around at the same time as the earliest archaeological evidence for any kind of an expressive art. But the role of a game designer as a game designer is quite recent, and also that in my talk about the notable game designers, I'm only focusing on game designers for video games. There are many other game designers, for very famous game designers for board games, role-playing games, card games, children's games, sports, and so on. But I'm focusing on video games in this talk. So the first one, Shigeru Miyamoto, I hope that many of you already know him, that he has been a extremely influential genre-defining person for many different genres, like from Donkey Kong 1981 to Super Mario Bros. 85, extremely influential games for the whole video games industry, and also that what kinds of games that we have now. The Legend of Zelda series, well, it started much earlier than 98, but this is also the Legend of Zelda has been a genre-defining one of the genre-defining games by Shigeru Miyamoto. And he has talked about design. He talked about design sometimes, but and here are some he says that a delayed game is eventually good, a bad game is bad forever. That is from the production side point of view. And he has also talked that he gets inspiration from his childhood memories for many of the games, such as exploring wilderness and caves for inspiration for Zelda, and for Chain Chomp, that he was attacked by a dog on chain when he was a child. So he's using inspiration from all kinds of experiences. And that is also the case that for game designers, is that you can get inspiration from pretty much everywhere. From anything. And again, like a genre-defining person, Roberta Williams, she's the designer behind like King's Quest 1, King's Quest 2, Phantasmagoria, King's Quest Mask of Eternity, and Roberta Williams that she pretty much created the whole graphic adventure genre in the beginning of 80s. And she also has said that the adventure game is really an interactive story set with puzzles and obstacles to solve, and then also that kind of a game genre will never die, because it is a part of a storytelling genres which would never die. And I think that Roberta Williams is pretty on the mark in this quote. And this is also the case, is that the games what we play, that there are many different kinds of game genres and game types at the moment, and they are also constantly evolving, because designers that they explore new kinds of games and new kinds of ways of expressing what games can express the best, the agency of the players. With Crawford, again, very well known in the games industry, has been there more 40 years, something like that. Like Eastern Front, 1941, Balance of Power, Balance of Planet. That he was working quite a lot on like strategy games genre, and he has been also writing about game design. That he's The Art of Computer Game Design, I think it was 1983, was pretty much one of the first published books dealing about what game design is. And his other books, like The Art of Interactive Design and on game design, they are worthwhile to check as well. He has been also very influential in the game industry, that he was one of the founding members or founding people behind the Game Developers Conference. And here are some of his quotes, which I actually like pretty much. It's easier to learn from Turkish than from Masterworks, which is that if you want to learn how to do game design, also play bad games. Accept full moral responsibility for the games you design. That is important. You as a designer, you really are responsible of the games that you design. It's like the moral responsibility as lies on the designer. And also, like, always delete clever ideas that don't add to the design, which means that keep it simple, stupid. And the logic of the game dominates. Pick a topic to fit it. And this is also some things that there is still conversations and discussions about this one. That does do the game mechanics. The role of game mechanics in comparison to the theme or the topic that they're dealing with. But that is a very contested area at the moment. And then also that if you have any questions, then just put them in the chat, and I'll answer the questions right away or at the end of the talk. And the last one, those who would build the future must understand the past, is that if you want to understand or want to be part of the future of game design, it is extremely important that you also understand the history of games and history of many game genres, and then also the history of games and not only the video games. So that's why, like in our courses in the games computing at the University of Lincoln, that we also teach the history of games, spanning back to the prehistoric games. So in that, and then also trying to understand that how games have been part of human cultures always. Like it is that all human cultures, all known human cultures have games. Peter Molyneux, again, a genre-defining, extremely influential person. Populous 1989, I remember playing Populous. I was quite obsessed with Populous at the end of the 80s. But there are also many other ones here: Theme Park, Syndicate, Dungeon Keeper, Fable, Black and White series. So again, very influential games and have a big impact on different kind of genres that we have now. And here are some of the things that Peter Molyneux has been talking about. He's also well known for that. Some of his quotes are a bit provocative. Like interfaces are paramount. That is that you have to have a good interface for the game, and also designing a game is not thinking up a storyline, but about what the player does and sees while playing your idea. And that is also important to realize that it is not the story, but it is that what the player does and sees. And there are some other, like next time we will do it right. This is some of his failures, and also that if you are interested in that Peter Molyneux's quotes. There is also a Peter Molyneux that made some like mock quotes from Peter Molyneux in order to that what are the game ideas that Peter Molyneux could be working on. It's worthwhile to check. And Katie Salen, taking bus, I already mentioned earlier that she wrote the Rules of Play Game Design Fundamentals with Eric Zimmerman. And they're also edited together the Game Design Reader, a Rules of Play anthology. Both are extremely good books to learn about game design, and they have been also very influential in shaping up the discussions around game design, both in the academia and in the industry. And there are some things that what she has been saying, that identify design inspiration in particular moments of a game rather than in a game as a whole. And this is one way of being a game designer. I see game design as requiring a balance between a systematic analysis of constraints and understanding the precedent and sheer imagination. Again, it is that some of the skills required for being a game designer. I use many different prototyping methods: paper prototyping, physical, scenario writing, interactive prototyping, and so on. And this one also goes back to that in order to make sense or make the game ideas concrete, you have to have a prototype that you can play. And there are many different methods for prototyping the games when you are designing them. And these are also some of the things which we teach at the games computing, is that how to prototype in different mediums, from paper to physical to software prototypes. And that is and also prototype ideas rather than talk about them, and practice. And this is also some of the things that which when I teach game design and when we teach game design at the University of Lincoln, is that although you have to talk about your game design ideas, but also you have to make them concrete by prototyping, make them playable as early as possible in order to make sense of what your idea is. And again, practice, which means that is a prototyping, and game design is a skill that in order to get better, you just have to practice and think about the game design. Right, so that is a very, very brief overview and very selective overview of some of the notable game designers, but also from the quotes from those designers that you might already start to get an understanding that what the roles and responsibilities for the game designers are. So in one way that the game designer is an advocate for the player. So is that when you are making a game, is that you should have a clear vision of your intended audience, and then think about that how you are, what do you want to give to that audience. And then also when you are designing the game itself, you have to take into account that how this intended audience would play your game and what kind of player experience they would have. And some of the responsibility here is, which goes also back to what Chris Crawford was saying about the moral responsibility of game designers, is that you are providing good gameplay by creating different ideas and working on those ideas, and also ensuring the quality, that how your ideas come to be as a fully fledged game in the end, which is making sure that intended gameplay is achieved. The project leader is in the parenthesis that is it very much depends on the development environment, but in some cases that the game designers that they are also taking the project leader role, or that the game designers that they also act as producers, higher level producers in the game companies later. For example, Shigeru Miyamoto is a producer nowadays. And then some of the skills required by game designers, I touched upon those ones a little bit. So communication is one of the key requirements for being a game designer. If you are making a game design, you have to be able to communicate with other people about your ideas by writing, by speaking, or here sketching and prototyping. And that's why what Katie Saylor was saying, that that about prototype, because making a prototype and giving a prototype to another person makes that game idea much more concrete, and the other people can react to it. So it is about how you want to communicate your ideas and how do you make those ideas more concrete. Of course, there's the skills for finding ideas and inspiration, and this is also often quite personal, and many people have different ways of finding ideas and inspiration. But it's also that for a designer is that it's not about finding those ideas and inspiration, but also how to synthesize these ideas and inspirations into something which you can make concrete, which you can make a game design based on. And to help on that finding ideas and inspiration is that the designers, they should have an extensive knowledge of games. And that's why, and all kinds of games, from video games, computer games, mobile games, children's games, board games, card games, tabletop role-playing games, live-action role-playing games, sports, folk games, and so on. The more you know about games in general and how games are played in different cultures, the better game designer you are going to be. And also extensive knowledge of gameplay, which means that you play games and also play many. And in order to get that extensive knowledge of gameplay, you have to play yourself a lot of different kinds of games. And being a game designer also means that getting that extensive knowledge is that you have to play games that you don't like. And that's something that you are, that I try to force myself. I sometimes fail to play games that which I really hate, and also try play game genres that which I don't like, because that will give me a better understanding what gameplay in general is. Also, have to have an extensive knowledge of other media and arts. All excellent game designers I know, they read a lot. They are also interested in other arts and other media than just games. So some of them that they have degrees in art history and in philosophy and so on, because that understanding what human expression means will give you a much better founding for understanding what games as human expression are, and that will make you a better game designer. And that will also finding ideas and inspiration, other media, and especially other arts, art history. That is a almost a never-ending fountain of or a mine, a source for finding ideas and inspiration for different kinds of games. Analytical skills. In order to be a game designer, you have to be able to analyze and also synthesize ideas, and then also when you are, for example, that when you are in a very early stages of working on a game, you have to be able to analyze your game from many different points of view, from the game mechanics, from the intended player experience, and then also that you have to be able to dissect the different game mechanics in order to make sense of how these game mechanics work together. And those analytical skills are paramount for to be a good game designer. Self-reflection, that you are able to think about how you think about game design. The so-called reflexive practitioner as a designer, and that self-reflection helps you to make better use of your current skills, but also allows you to understand that where you are, your weak points, which then allows you to enhance your practice by focusing on the weak points and acknowledging those weak points. And self-reflection is also that when you think about how you think about game design, allows you to change your viewpoints on different design situations. It makes you a much more flexible and fluid game designer. And the last one, compromising, is that game design is an exercise in compromise. Is that because usually you have a lot of different ideas and you can't fit them all into one game. That is from just from your personal game designer point of view, but it's also that especially if you work in a team or work in a bigger company, you have to make compromises, and you have to be able to make those compromises and justify those compromises. So game design and game development, there are many different designer roles in game development. Here's just the systems design, combat, economic, character level, world, story design, that these are more related to the game design itself. And then you also have a lot of other design roles in game development, like visual, audio, UI, product design, marketing design, and so on, which are not related to the game itself that much, even though that, well, of course, UI, visual design, and audio design, they are part of the game. But here in this talk, I'm more focusing on the gameplay design, and they are also focusing on the systems design. What is designing the gameplay, and in this case, the gameplay is that what are the interactions that the players are going to have with your game over time, because that is, in my opinion, in the heart of the game. As also goes back to what Salem and Zimmerman were talking about. What game design is to make those rules and systems for the play to happen. Of course, that all these things, they are extremely important in game development, but it's just that the system design is a focus for this talk, and I also think that it is the bedrock of all games. So I'll introduce you to mechanics, gameplay, player experience, that there are three important concepts So here I'm following the mechanics, gameplay, player experience conceptual framework from Zubek in his Elements of Game Design, which is very similar to mechanics dynamics, or it is similar to mechanics dynamics and aesthetics model from Hunicke, Leblanc, and also Zubek, an earlier one, the MDA model. But in the latest version, that in the Elements of Game Design, that Zubek is making the MDA model and modifying the MDA model to be more precise. And that's why I'm using the mechanics, gameplay, player experience model here. So the mechanics, that they are the individual pieces that make up the game. Mechanics and systems. Gameplay is a dynamic process of players interacting with the game and each other. And then the last one is player experience, which is the subjective experience that comes from participating in gameplay. And Kieran Hicks was talking about the player experience part earlier today. And here I am focusing on the mechanics and gameplay and how to design for them. So this is the model. So you have the player, and the player interacts with the mechanics and systems, which then generate the gameplay. So interacting with the gameplay itself, and then that creates the player experiences. So it is that the player has to work with the mechanics and systems of the game in order to give rise to that dynamic gameplay, and which then gives that then the player experience emerges from that gameplay. So that's one way of understanding how games work. And here's a poker. So for the mechanics and systems for the poker, that you have cards, chips, and rules that they are quite complex systems. Then you have the gameplay, which is the dynamics of the interaction with the game. It's like betting, bluffing, and calling. And then you come into the player experience, which is the competing, strategizing, and socializing. And there's also the player experience that might be that the joy in deceit and things like that, which is part of the playing poker. So I hope that this makes some sense, that what is the difference between mechanics, the gameplay, and player experience. Because making those divisions, that it is then easier to understand how game design works. Here is that when looking back into this model, is that the designer tries to affect the player experiences from the game by manipulating the mechanics and systems. So in this case, it is that I, as a designer, want to have the players to experience certain things, but the only way to do it is to manipulate the mechanics and systems. And that's why it goes also back to what Eric Zimmerman was saying about the second order design problem. And I'll also introduce what are the mechanics and systems. This is the gameplay design patterns is one way of encapsulating that information. And I've been involved in the gameplay design patterns project for almost 20 years now. And gameplay design patterns, that they are a way to describe design choices or emergent features that occur in many games. And the design patterns, that they also give explanations that why these design choices have been made. And most of the design patterns, that they focus on the mechanics and systems and gameplay level. So on the gameplay level here. So the gameplay design patterns, that they encapsulate knowledge about how different kinds of mechanics and gameplay features have been designed in other games, and give guides to how to make similar design choices in your own game projects. So that the design patterns, that they give examples of what is required to make the pattern emerge, and then also what consequences the pattern can have on gameplay. And so here are some of the examples of very basic gameplay design patterns. And here, like in Pac-Man, that you have design patterns of chase and evade. And these patterns, that they describe goal structures, motivations, and then also actions available for the player or other entities in the game. And Pac-Man is actually quite a lot of, it is an interplay of chase and evade between the Pac-Man and the Ghost. And also one of the gameplay design patterns is role reversal, which explains both Pac-Man. So when a Pac-Man eats a power pill, there's a role reversal. Now, previously, as a Pac-Man, I had to evade the ghost, but after eating the power pill, I can now chase the ghosts. And that role reversal gameplay design pattern is also like in children's games, a game Tag or It. So where one of the players is It and tries to catch the other players. And if I touch another player, if I'm It and I catch another player, then there's a role reversal. So now I have to run away from the new It. And there are some other very basic design patterns here, like parallel lives or shoot and aim and rock, paper, scissors. So I don't go that much into details, but like shoot and aim is, or aim and actually it should be aim and shoot, is also a very well-known gameplay design pattern, especially in video games nowadays. And in Missile Command, that is one of the basic action patterns there, aim and shoot. So that these design patterns that they then describe how to design these things, these mechanics, these systems into your games. And how to get more about these design patterns. Well, there's this book, Patterns in Game Design, by Staffan Björk and me. Excuse me, just a second. Right. Yeah, the sun started to shine in. Sorry about that. So there's a book, Patterns in Game Design, 2004, Staffan Björk and me, published by Charles River Media. Unfortunately, this book is out of print at the moment, but we are working on getting it published, maybe in the next 10 years or so. But you can find copies in libraries and so on. And another one is that there's a gameplaydesignpatterns.org, which is a wiki managed by Staffan Björk, and it has the book, the Patterns in Game Design had 296 patterns. The Gameplay Design Patterns.org currently has over 600 different patterns, and they are freely available. You can go and check that that pattern library there. The pattern descriptions there, that they are of different quality, but the basic patterns are quite well represented there. So that is a resource for you that if you are interested in the design patterns approach to game design. And the last one about design patterns is the Gameplay Design Patterns Visualization Tool by Christpher Lee. Just a typo, sorry about that. gdpv.is, and this is a visualization system and browsing system for the Gameplay Design Patterns wiki. So it uses all the pattern descriptions from the wiki itself, and then makes these different kinds of visualizations, and you can browse the design pattern collection by going through these visualizations and also making very different kinds of. There's a visual programming language or visual programming system for filtering different kinds of patterns and how for the visualization. It is well worth to check. Right. So that is the basis of the game design is about making changes to the mechanics and systems in order to influence the player experience. And now the last one is the games as art of agency, which is based on that games are actually an art form in itself. That not all games are art, but game design is an art form. It doesn't matter that if it's a good art or not, but it is that. So I'm understanding here that art as making things special. So this is based on Ramachandran and Hirstein's. So that the art as making things special is based on Ellen Dissanayak's Homo aestheticus, and her further thinking is that art is making everyday things special. And then the caricature principle is Ramachandran and Hirstein's The Science of Art. And these are saying that in art, how they make things special is that arts have involved forms which are then characterized. So they are formalized or abstract, compressed, or they are made incomplete, exaggerated, elaborated, transposed to different context, awkward, repetitive, or expectations are manipulated. And why it is called caricature principle is that here, that as you can see, the caricature of Charlie Chaplin is that it is has compressed features, it has incomplete features, it has exaggerated features, elaborated, and so on features from that photo of Charlie Chaplin's The Tramp, even though that photo as well is a caricature of a tramp figure. As you can see that, for example, that the orientation of the direction of the feet is exaggerated, and then also it made it in an awkward position. So that's one way of addressing that what art is. Art is making things special through a caricature principle. And this is actually in all kinds of art, is that making things special through the caricature principle. So in this case, the involved forms are different in different arts, in different areas of art. For example, for music, the involved form is how we hear sound. And then the artist uses these principles of caricature principles in order to make it special. So that is how we get music. That is how we get different kind of soundscapes. In painting or traditional painting, our visual perception from one point of view, that is the involved form. And also that painting is actually also exploring that how our visual system works in comparison to our experience of the world. In sculpture, involved form is the perception of three-dimensional objects, because in sculpture you can walk around the sculpture, you can touch them in some context. In architecture, the involved forms are the volume of contained spaces and also movement through such spaces. So that's why architecture is much more complex art form, in my opinion, than, for example, just sculpture. And it is also architecture is closer to games as an art form than games to than painting to games as an art form. Because in architecture you have to also think about how people move through such spaces. And in games, the involved form is actually intentional behavior and agency. And that is that games, and when you're designing games, that you are working with these intentional behaviors and sense of agency as a involved form design material, and then you are sculpting and shaping these things to make them special, and that's how you get games. And here it's also based on a view on that play in so all kinds of play, including animal play and children play. That in play, in free play, there are caricatures of behavior, and here the involved behavioral forms that they are formalized, abstract, compressed. For example, in races and many sports, in like a 100 millimeter task that you have that's a formalized and compressed versus of running. They are incomplete, such as in play, punch, and bite. They are exaggerated, as in gamboling, elaborated, as in dance, transposed to different contexts in symbolic play, for example, playing house, make it awkward, twister, parkour, repetitive, skipping, tennis, or other kinds of ball games of where you have a very, very repetitive structures. And the last one, expectations are manipulated, the earliest example, or from human development point of view, the earliest play behavior where the expectations are manipulated is peekaboo, where the toddler's expectations are manipulated in certain ways, and so these are forms of play, and you can see that the caricature principles are there, so that it is that making play from other kinds of activities and behavior. And games actually that they consist of these play behaviors, but in a crystallized form. That goes back to the agency and games. Is that so games allow us to exercise our agency, which is that an agency I'm defining here as the capability to influence the course of events by our actions. So games are always an exercise in our agency, because no player actions, there's no game. You have to play the game. You have to be active somehow in the game in order to make it a game. There are some very, very niche outliers there, but I'm not going to focus on those ones. But also is that the games offer us to experience alternative agencies to our ordinary one. So that it can be saying that the games communicate different forms of agency. So the through playing games I can, and also the through playing games and through imaginative acts that I can experience agencies that would be impossible for me to experience in my ordinary life. They could be way too dangerous or way too costly for me to experience. And then it is that the game designers that make these alternate forms of agency special by manipulating those mechanics and systems. So through the mechanics and systems, that the mechanics and systems are the way of applying the caricature principle to these involved forms, which is in games is agency. So game design can be seen as sculpting agency in a different way. So in addition to what Kieran Hicks was saying, that about player experience, I can also say that the player experience is the experience of alternate characterized agency. And here I'm following that Nguyen's great book, Games, Agency as Art, came out earlier this year. So to a certain extent, when I'm talking about games and agency, I'm following Nguyen. I recommend that book as well. So when coming back to the mechanics, gameplay, player experience. So the player experience is the feeling of player agency when you're playing the game. And again, the designer tries to affect those by manipulating the mechanics and systems. So here are some high-level examples of agency in games and sports, and how they are made special in chess. So chess makes strategic thinking, outwitting the opponent, and spatial reasoning. And by making those rules of chess and those that you have the tokens that you have in chess, that you apply the abstraction, formalizing, compressing, making elaborate and exaggerate some of the things which are related to strategic thinking, outwitting the opponent, and spatial reasoning. And the game Werewolf and Mafia, where the agency is about the verbal social manipulation, bluffing, and deceit. And in Werewolf and Mafia, that contains those games types that they contain the rule structures which focus on this verbal social manipulation, bluffing, and deceit, and it makes them special. That's why that they are so thrilling games. And they are also make them special in such a way that that you can try these alternate forms of agency, where you can be a bluffing and deceitful. You are involved in very blunt verbal social manipulation in that game setting, which would be otherwise very costly or dangerous in real life. In basketball, you have team coordination, assessment of locations and intentions of other humans, and object manipulation as part of the main things about agency that is then made special through the basketball rules. And 100-meter dash is that the competition against peers, efficiency of movement, and in this case within a condensed and formalized environment. So there is that the agency in games, and in this case some sports, is that is about taking the everyday agency of human beings and then making them special through manipulating mechanics and systems and rules. So game design is, that is the current idea, is sculpting agency through manipulation of mechanics and systems. Right, so that's so there are the references and resources used in this talk, and there are no questions, so thank you all and happy holidays.